Well, hello, good afternoon. I'm Badam Ejikadal. I hope you're all doing well. Thank you for coming. I'm going to go quickly so we have time to go over all this information. The topic we're going to talk about is calendrical geometry. A few years ago, I specialized in studying sacred geometry, and there's a lot of talk about the geometry of the flower of life and things like that, but not much sacred geometry has been found specifically in Anahuac. Although we also have the flower of life and several well-known symbols here in the Chimales and similar things. Here, the geometry we're going to look at will help us directly interpret those beautiful calendrical stones our ancestors left us. So without further ado, I'm going to start with a bit of context. What we see here are images from the book by Jean Martino, a Frenchman who compiled the geometry used in Europe to measure different things such as the movements of the planets and the distances between the planets. Here we can see this little dot, which is the Sun. This is the symbol for Mercury, and over there is Venus. And we can see how between the Sun, Mercury, and Venus, we have this perfect triangle and these circles. And all the distances in the book are given in large spatial units and match this geometry. Now here we see how Venus completes 5 cycles in one orbit around the Sun, which divides the year into 73 parts, and that's super important. That's why the number 72, the number 73 is fundamental in our calendars. Anyone who studies calendars will know that 72 and 52 go hand in hand, right? 73, 52. But here it's also because Venus completes 5 cycles in a year. Here we see other planetary cycles, several of Mercury in these cases. And let's see, I started to notice certain patterns, which is that when we have a circle on the outside and a circle on the inside, we can create these stars. If you can see, we draw a diameter here and these stars are tangent, meaning they only touch the circle at one point and they will be tangent all around. Yes, so there is a perfect geometry in the relationship between the inner circle and the outer one. Here we will also see that there are relationships in 3 dimensions. Here we are talking about platonic solids, or working with the icosahedron and the relationship of at least 4 planetary bodies. Here we also see more relationships with Mercury, with Jupiter. And I'm just giving you all this as context because I was already studying astrology, which uses all this kind of geometry. Could you please continue? This is a perfectly hexagonal geometry that is related to the planet Jupiter. And many hexagonal symbols are related to that. Could you please continue? Perfect triangles, octagons, and again, for example, here, there is an essential geometric relationship to understand what we are talking about. When we have a circle with a value of 1 and a circle with a value of 2, both concentric, in other words, I set my compass to 1 and then to 2, there is always an equilateral triangle between a circle of 1 and a circle of 2. And from these relationships, we will be able to construct geometry. Here we are going to see what they call the flowers, which is the retrograde motion of the planets. They don't just go around like this, they also make this little turn. This retrograde motion is very interesting, and I think that in other talks I even related to the concept of no time. Why? Because I think the planet doesn't always move forward. There are small moments when it does a sort of looping motion. But anyway, more geometry, more diagrams. All of these are relationships between planets, and we can see how they all form little geometric shapes. The book is by John Martino. It's called The Book of Coincidences, highly recommended. And well, here we see the shapes of the planets and how that's where Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday come from, because each one has a celestial body. There are 7 metals, and it was very interesting to see how they were all connected. Well, here I just want to specifically mention that the 7 classical metals, like Mercury and also gold, which is related to the sun, silver, and so on, are indeed connected here to the various metals in the ancient Chaldean origin, which is precisely called the Chaldean order. It's an order that has existed for centuries, and it's very interesting that now that we know the chemical composition of these metals, they are arranged in ascending or descending order according to their chemical composition. Here are some drawings I made in my notebook, which I also want to share with you, as we had already discussed, right? If we have 1 and 2, we get an equilateral triangle that forms right in the center. We can do this in the notebook. I also started experimenting with what I mentioned before. If we have a large circle and a small circle, we can start drawing tangents to interpret different things. Here we see how a triangle appears. All of this is a circle. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. They are whole numbers. And here we have triangles, an almost perfect octagon, circles divided into 9 into 13. It's incredible how much geometry emerges from these circles, right? Here we have more of these geometries. This is a geometry that relates to a very ancient lunar calendar where they make a square of. It's a topic they call the squaring of the circle in material terms, where this square is equal in value to this circle, but here it will show us the different phases of the moon that were used through these geometric figures. It's a very ancient lunar calendar. Here are calendars that were made in ancient times using these small and large circles. More examples of small and large circles. Here's another example. Another example, I worked on all of this in my notebook, and we'll see that there's a very interesting relationship between these circles, concentric circles, some larger and some smaller. Everything in that folder is just context. As you can see, these are examples, and I have dozens and dozens of these kinds of little drawings that we can create using simple geometry with a pair by ruling the notebook. Now, with that context, you saw the stars. Imagine the look on my face when I saw this. He is Professor Maestro Quintilio Garcia. Quintilio Garcia put this exactly in the Tonalpohualli. This, which you can't quite see, though I think it's a bit clearer on the tapes, we have a circle divided into 20 sections. Just like we usually have the Huaychicalli, the Great Eagle Gourd. Also known as the Sunstone, the Aztec calendar, we have those 20 divisions. Quintilio, what is he doing? He takes those 20 divisions and connects them with trecenas. I'm going to explain it right now. I just want you to know that these drawings are connecting the Tonalco Gual. The Tonalco Gual are trecenas and veintenas combined. These lines are going to connect with the 13ths, and the whole circle is at 20. It's a super interesting lesson from Maestro Garcia on the edge of the Sierra, right? Now, to give some context to this, I'm going to explain the tonal cobalt. And I know many of you are familiar with it, but anyway, let's do a 2-minute review so we're all up to speed. We're going to combine 20 symbols, Zipakli, Egekatli, etc. We're going to go all the way to Xochitl. Next one, please. We're going to combine these 20 with 13 numbers. Yes, Omeyeya. Here I use little Mayan symbols, although normally the ones are repeated in our cultures. And here we have a tone in Xipohualli, which is basically the 13 numbers and the 20 essences combined. We start with 1 Zipakli, Ehekatl, and so on until 13 Akatl. Akatl is number 13, and then we go back to 1 Ocelot. Ocelot is 14, but it returns to 1. Yes, this is essentially the structure of the Tonalpohualli. The most important thing I want you to notice here, please, are the carriers. We're going to call the first symbol of a cycle a carrier. It can be a year, it can be a trecena. In this case, all of these are trecenas. The carriers of the trecenas are Zipakli, Ocelot, Mazat, Xochitl, Acatl, and so on. That means we are jumping by 13s. Just by looking at these carriers, we implicitly know that there is a tonal kawali. We wouldn't need to see all 260 figures. Many times in the codices, we will only see the carriers. Here we see it, not just the carriers, but Zipakli, Ocelot, Mazat, Xochitl, Acatl, because here we have 12 little dots and the 13th, and then back again 13 and 13. Do you see how it's no longer necessary to show the entire Tonalkawali? We will identify it by its carriers. Someone who doesn't know about the carriers might think they can't find the order, but the order is there. Here in the Fijervar and Maya, we see the same thing. Zipakli, the little dots, Ocelot, Mazat, Xochitl, Acatl, all of these here, let's see, are the carriers. So we have a Tonalcohuari. I mean, here it's more obvious because here are the little dots, right? We start with Zipakli, 12 little dots, Ocelot, but what I want you to notice is that we can always identify a Tonalcohuari by looking at its carriers. Okay, here we already have the actual work on the Hucoaxicali. Here is where my research begins. with what Quintilio told me, with the image you saw of Quintilio and his Tonalcohuari, I thought, well, we should see if that matches up with the calendar in the Hueco Oxicali. And what did I do? Well, I used the technology of printing a photocopy. So, super easy. Now I have a photocopy, a proportion. So here I put the numbers from 1 to 20 to make it really obvious, right? So we can all see it. And what do? I use Quintilio's technique of joining the trecenas. The first trecena is Hipáclito, and it ends here at symbol 13 Acatl. And the next trecena is Ocelot. What we're doing is dividing a trecena. Here we're going to have these 13 numbers. But notice how it passes so tangentially. Do you remember what we've been looking at? Here there's a circle outside, and here it only touches at one point. How exciting, right? The next one, look at the next one, another trecena, boom! It passes tangentially. The next one, how about that? Look how beautiful that is. I swear to you, the excitement I felt when making this drawing and saying, oh, Quintilius drawing. Are they fitting in perfectly? Do you see the circle? Yes. Do you see that? I don't touch it. The outer circle and the inner one are defining this proportion. Wow. One more up to there, please. And what we're seeing here is exactly the tonalco. Just like how Quintilio Garcia uses it, I simply took it from the photocopy and got this result and said, wow. Could this be a coincidence? There were people at ENA who said this isn't even a calendar, right? Taking the word calendar to mean a way of counting time. Well, here it's proven that this is a Tonalpohualli. Totally proven. Or could it be a coincidence? Let's see. And there are 20, right? There are 20. In other words, the 20 symbols are going to be grouped into trecenas. By joining the 20 trecenas, we get the 260-day cycle. What I would do is connect. Remember I told you, right? Sipat, Yoselot, Mazat. Exactly. That's how it goes. Sipat, Yoselot, Mazat, Xochitl, Acatl. And you can do that geometry at home. It's very satisfying. Do my students do it? And here we're going to see a figure. Although it's in a codex, it's a more Spanish-style representation. But what we're seeing is the representation of the Chumolpili. The Chumolpili is 52 years, 4 Tlalpilis. Here we have 13. The 52-year cycle is super important. We already know that Don Alcobol is important. Now we have to identify 52 years. The same 52-year cycle in the Codex Borbonicus, it's the same 52 years. I want you to identify that portion of time, which is quite important. Again, here we have the Tonalcohualli. Let's do this. We already had 20 divisions here, right? So what I said is, let's make these divisions, but they have to be symmetrical. The next circle has these little squares. In Chalchihuites, each of these figures clearly displays 5 elements, so let's count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Many books often state that there are 10 times 4, which calculates to 40 figures. Okay, that could be an interpretation, but I questioned this assumption and wondered, what if this arrangement is actually symmetrical? I took the measurement of these 3 figures with my compass, and to my surprise, I realized that their size is exactly the size of 3 hidden squares that would be concealed right here within the design. So with these lines, we would be placing the squares that would be geometrically behind these little sun rays. It's a test, right? I said, let's see how it goes. So remember, it's 10 plus 1, 2, 3, that's 13. 13 times 4, 52. Ah, I said, this makes much more sense, doesn't it? They always tell us there are 40 Chalchihuites, but it would make much more sense if there were 52. Plus it forms a perfect geometric circle. And here I'm going to show you the division of the 260 days, so there's no doubt. There are 52, but each one of these is worth 5. 5, 10, 15, all the way to 260. If each one is worth 5 and there are 52, what do we have there? A Tonalpohualli. Do you think that's just another coincidence? No. So let's look at the next one. What is the most important cycle that joins with the tonal pohwali? The tonal pohwali of 260 will join with the 360, the Z pohwali. And that tonal pohwali and Z pohwali will give us those cycles of 52 years and 73 tonal pohwali. So now we have the tonal pohwali of 260. Now we're going to look for 360 or 365 because it could be the year with or without Nemontemi, which is also very interesting, right? At that point, it's up to whoever takes it. So if we've already made a full turn, if I start here and make a full turn, that's 260. Do you agree? Yes. So if I add 100 to 260, how much is that? 360. So we have a year. And what do you think? It passes tangentially. Next one, please. Another year. Another year. Oh, two who were the excitement. Oh, kings at the center of the appointment. If you want to see the rest on the mic, ha ha ha, ha 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 ha. Yes, so here we see how the years come together. Each little line is 360 days, another 360, another 360. We are combining tonal pohwali and jour pohwali in each of these lines. And let's see, how many are there? 13. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Another 13. So 13 years is a plan P. Do you remember that a moment ago I told you it was really important? So look at the explosion. Can you imagine the excitement you can have at home just hanging out and messing with these things? I am truly grateful to my Mexican ancestors for giving me this opportunity to see them, and maybe I remember other lives. But with what Quintilio did, at first we said, wow, a Tanalco guy is gone, and here it's a Tlalpil. It's incredible because we had never known how to read this circle before. Honestly, I have read dozens of, well, maybe not that many, but about 10 books. I've gone through all this and I've listened to all kinds of explanations people have given me. No one really gets it until, well, it's been almost 10 years since I discovered this. But honestly, it still hasn't become very well known. It's new information for many people, so I'm glad to share it. So now we have, we've already seen the Tonalco Guay and the Platelic, which are the same thing. Here we've already passed the Chichihuitis, okay? And so here there are some little folds. Let's count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Ah, the same 10. But there are also little sun rays. Here there are 8. The 4 big ones here, and we have 4 small ones. And guess what? Does it match up with the space if we take 3 of these? It matches. Besides, we had already seen that they hid 3 from us in the other one, right? So if instead of 10 there are 13. 13 times 8. How much is 13 times 8? 104. Does 104 sound familiar to anyone? It's a huehuetelist. They are 2 cycles of 52, which with just those 2 cycles will be the other larger cycles of Venus. The huehuetelist is super important. So we have 20 and a tonal pobal from here. In the next one we have the 260. Incredible. And also with the lines they combine between 160 and 260. So we have 104 years in the large circle. At this point I didn't know what to look for before drawing that line. Which one comes next? That line was the first one I drew. I didn't know what I was going to find. I just said, now let's do it the other way around. First I looked for the cycle and then the line. Now I'm going to draw a tangent line to see where it takes me. So there are 2 possibilities here. We have 13 times 2 times 3, that's 39, and 1, 40. Up to here it reached 40. So it could be 40 years. But the other option, which seems much more likely to me, is that it's 104 years for 1 cycle plus 40. In other words, 144 years. Anyone who knows anything about esoteric stuff knows that 144 is extremely important. These are Anahuac dates. 12 times 12, 144. 72 times 2? But we also see the 144,000 chosen ones of the apocalypse in the Bible. Because in reality, if we start studying ancient religions, they all have calendars. It's not just an obsession in Anahuac. The Jews, the Christians, even if they try to hide it, they're all following a calendar system. So for me, this cycle would be 144 years. We can look at the others. And each line would then be another new cycle of 144 years. And we're going to get a new star. And this new star is going to give us a much larger cycle, which is 144 times 13. In fact, it's an identical star to the one we saw before, except that instead of being based on this circle, it's on the outer one. And there you can see it and count for yourselves. And 144 is a very important number, just like 72. It was a way of measuring for the ancients. That's right, which is why I think that calendar we saw, instead of 40 years, it must be 144. If you do the math, 40 times 13 will give you a common result. But if you do 144 times 13, you'll also get 1800 and something. But that's already an important period to recognize. All the cycles we saw were in the Huipaucali. It's absolutely clear to me that this is a new discovery, a new understanding. So I said, all the time we see these circles, circles within circles, and visions. This one is called the Chalco disc. So maybe I'll find something there. So I set myself the task of marking the divisions, in this case 28. We have 18 Tonalpohualli that are going to combine or do the same as 13 years, 18 and 13. But this cycle of 18 phases, we can move on to the next one. Let's see how these cycles of 18 keep repeating throughout the entire stone. So you can see, I don't have the exact data right now, but these are cycles of the Tonalpohualli. What I want you to see is that this matches the geometry and matches the calendars. So as Xochitl said, this really is a new stage in our understanding of our calendars. We hadn't really been able to understand these calendars until we saw this geometry. Or I don't know if anyone could still believe that this is just a coincidence. But I think it proves itself. There are things you could say, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But to find 7, and I actually have more, on the Pizok disc I have several. It's just that I haven't quite found their calendrical significance yet. But there are cycles there, and even those cycles are going to tell us things. Maybe I don't know what that cycle is, but the stone is showing us things. So it really is a new stage of interpretation. I discovered this in 2014 and I've been working on it since around 2010, so I'm very pleased to be able to share this knowledge with more people. I think it's fundamental for interpreting all the stones we have. How many of these stones are there? And they left them for someone to discover or remember. I do believe in other lives, you know. Maybe that's already something personal. But I did all the work and I'm telling you, photocopies and everything. The rules are really simple, but honestly, the passion and the search and what I felt and everything makes me think that we are still connected to our ancestors, not just through our studies, but that there are planes and a communication that goes beyond time, starting with the stones. Those stones stayed there and now we have the key to decipher what they are. Thank you very much. Thanks to everyone.